Christians claim that there are 6 verses in the Bible that condemn LGBT people in our relationships. In the next 3 minutes, I'm going to go through all 6 of those verses and show you why none of them condemn LGBT people or our lives and love. The first verse that Christians use to condemn LGBT people comes from the book of Genesis chapter 19. It's the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. In the story, 2 angels come to a man named Lot's house, but on their way to Lot's house, a group of men from the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah try to gang rape them. In response, God pours out judgment and destroys the cities. Now, people have interpreted the reason God destroyed those cities was because of the men trying to have sex with these angels that appeared as men. But that's actually not it at all. The book of Ezekiel in chapter 16, verses 48 and 49 tells us that the reason God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah is because they were greedy, that they didn't help the poor and the needy, that they were inhospitable to strangers. In the ancient Near East, being hospitable to guests, to foreigners, was a cornerstone of that culture. It still is. And so these men not welcoming these people in, but instead trying to abuse them and exploit them, that's why God destroyed the city. It had nothing to do with anyone's sexuality. And in fact, if you read the story, these are angels that are going to be assaulted by a group of men. That's not homosexuality. That would be something about angel abuse. The next 2 verses come from the book of Leviticus chapter 18:22 and 20:13. In these passages, you can read the entirety of each chapter and you'll find that this list of prohibitions is about idolatry. God is calling the Jewish people not to be like the pagan cultures that surround them. And in these pagan cultures, they would often use sex as a sacrifice to gods and goddesses. And so in Leviticus 18:22, for instance, where it says a man shall not lie with a man as with a woman, for this is an abomination, the verse right before that says you shall not sacrifice your child to Molech. The idea here is the sex being talked about in verse 22 is in relationship to the idolatry being referenced in the verse before and throughout the rest of the chapter. It's about temple prostitution and worshiping a false god. It's not about heterosexuality versus homosexuality at all. Which brings us to the New Testament, the book of Romans chapter 1, 1 Corinthians 6:9, and 1 Timothy 9:10. All 3 of these verses are being written by Paul to an audience in the Greco-Roman world. And if you look up first century Greco-Roman world, you'll find that there were cults to the goddess Aphrodite and cults to the god Bacchus. Both of these gods and goddesses are worshipped through sexual sacrifice. If you read Romans chapter 1, for instance, it says clearly that the sex that's taking place, men with men, women and women, is in context of exchanging the truth of God for a lie and worshiping created things instead of the creator God. The passage literally describes the Roman people becoming idolatrous and then engaging in immoral sex in relation to the idolatry. It's condemning temple prostitution. It's condemning worshiping false gods. It's not condemning LGBT people who are created by God as LGBT and whose lives and loves reflect the glory of God.